Revenge office stories. Asterisk, the following story is a dramatization. It is inspired by real-world concepts in intellectual property law, corporate dynamics, and personal stories of workplace disputes. The company's individuals, specific technical details, and sequence of events described are fictional and have been created for narrative effect. The legal processes depicted are simplified and condensed for storytelling purposes and should not be taken as legal advice. Asterisk. My company fired me and stole my $450 million prototype. They thought I was powerless. What they didn't know was that I'd spent the last year building a legal trap, and they had just walked right into it. The betrayal happened at 9:03 a.m. on a Tuesday. It was cold, sterile, and brutally efficient. 14 minutes later, by 9:17 a.m., the digital paperwork was filed with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. They had patented my life's work, and they had the audacity to put my name on it, thinking that made it clean. They thought I was just another casualty of corporate ambition, a 41-year-old engineer put out to pasture. They were wrong. They thought they were starting a countdown on my career. They had no idea the clock they really started was on their own destruction, and I was the one holding the stopwatch. For 7 years, Ethelred Innovations wasn't just where I worked, it was my whole world. I was Dr. Eris Thorne, and I wasn't just a senior systems architect. I was the creator, the lead, the heart and soul of Project Chimera. And Chimera was my baby. It was a revolutionary energy storage system, a new kind of battery technology that was smaller, more efficient, and orders of magnitude more powerful than anything else out there. Early projections valued a working prototype at nearly $500 million. For 7 years, I lived and breathed it. I was the first one in the lab and the last one to kill the lights, long after the cleaners had gone home. My office was a chaotic symphony of white boards, choked with equations, half-empty coffee cups, and blueprints only I could make sense of. Chimera wasn't just a project. It was a promise I'd made to myself about what was possible. The guys running the company, the ones in the glass-walled offices on the top floor, they saw Chimera a little differently. To them, it wasn't a promise. It was a stock price, a headline, an asset. Marcus Vance, our CEO, was the kind of man who spoke exclusively in quarterly earnings and market caps. He had a smile that never touched his eyes and a handshake that felt like a contract negotiation. He saw the world in a spreadsheet, and people were just variables, liabilities to be managed. My direct supervisor was Julian Croft, and he was the more insidious of the two. He was the good cop, the one who'd put a hand on your shoulder and call you a rock star, while secretly plotting how to take credit for your work. A smiling serpent who knew exactly how to position himself, so the spotlight always found him. I worked with them, but I didn't work for them. I worked for the idea. I managed a small, brilliant team of engineers who shared my passion. We were a tight-knit crew, united by what we were building. They trusted me, and I did my best to shield them from the corporate games played by men like Marcus and Julian. I took the heat, I handled the budget meetings, I translated our complex work into the simple charts executives loved, all so my team could have the freedom to do what they did best, create. The breakthrough came on a Saturday. I was at home, staring at a schematic I'd taped to my kitchen wall when it hit me. A completely new way to design the core regulation matrix. It was the missing piece, the elegant solution we'd been hunting for over a year. A pure moment of creation. I spent the whole weekend in a blur, sketching, modeling, and running simulations on my personal computer. I didn't use a single company resource. This felt different. It was personal. This was my contribution, born not in their lab, but from a flash of insight in my own home. By Monday morning, I had a fully realized concept for a component that wouldn't just complete Chimera, but would amplify its efficiency by a factor of 10. When I showed it to Julian, his eyes widened, but not with scientific joy. It was the glint of greed. He called Marcus immediately. The three of us stood in my lab, the server hum a quiet backdrop to their dawning realization. Marcus clapped me on the back, a rare and unsettling gesture. "Eris," he said, his voice dripping with fake camaraderie, "you've done it. You've just made us all very, very rich." He said us, but his eyes were looking right past me at the dollar signs only he could see. Over the next few months, the vibe shifted. My meetings with Julian became less about technical progress and more about timelines and documentation. He wanted detailed reports, every blueprint, every line of code uploaded to the central server. He spun it as protecting the company's investment. At the time, I just thought it was typical corporate red tape. I was naive. I was so lost in the work, in the beautiful complexity of the machine, that I didn't see the gears of another machine turning against me. Then came that Tuesday. Julian called me into his office at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus was there, standing with his back to me. He didn't turn around. Julian's usual smile was gone, replaced by a stiff, uncomfortable line. "Eris," he started, "your contributions to this company have been significant." The past tense hit me like a punch to the gut. "However," he went on, reading from a script on his desk, "we've decided the project requires a different strategic direction. Your role has become redundant." Redundant. The word was just hanging in the air. Absurd and insulting. I was Project Chimera. How could I be redundant to my own creation? I looked from Julian's empty face to Marcus's unmoving back. This wasn't a discussion. It was an execution. "Your network access will be terminated at 9:05, Julian said flatly. "HR will escort you to your desk to collect your personal belongings." It was 9:03 a.m. I was fired. As I stood up, my mind reeling, Marcus finally turned. He had the nerve to look me in the eye. "Don't take it personally, Eris," he said, the ghost of his spreadsheet smile playing on his lips. "It's just business." I was numb for the next hour. The forced small talk with HR, the silent packing of my personal things into a cardboard box, the way my former colleagues avoided my eyes. I saw my team watching from the lab, their faces a mix of shock and fear. They knew it was wrong, but they were powerless, just like Marcus and Julian thought I was. Walking out of that building for the last time, the box in my arms felt less like my career and more like the anchor of my defeat. I had given them everything. In return, they had just erased me. The first few days were a blur of anger and disbelief. I kept replaying that meeting, the cold, rehearse lines, the absolute disrespect. I'd built their future, and they'd tossed me aside like a broken part. But beneath the rage, another feeling started to grow: suspicion. Marcus and Julian weren't just ruthless, they were planners. Firing me made 0 sense unless they already had everything they needed. Unless they were so sure they possessed my work that I was no longer a necessary part of the equation. That's when I remembered it. My weekend breakthrough. The core regulation matrix. The one piece of the puzzle that was truly, uniquely mine. A small, paranoid voice I developed over years of navigating corporate politics had whispered to me that weekend. Asterisk, protect this. This one's different. Asterisk. And I'd listened. On my own dime, on my personal laptop, I had drafted and filed a provisional patent application for that specific component. A provisional patent isn't a full-blown patent. It doesn't give you any rights to sue people on its own. It's more like a 1-year placeholder. It's a way of planting your flag with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, getting an official filing date that proves on this day you invented this thing. It was my secret insurance policy, a legal time stamp on my moment of creation. I hadn't told a soul at Ethelred. It was my secret weapon, tucked away for a day I prayed would never come. Now, sitting in my home office, surrounded by the rubble of my career, I felt a grim certainty. They were going to patent Chimera, and they were going to do it without me. Driven by a cold dread, I went to the USPTO's public database. My stomach dropped as I typed Ethelred Innovations into the search field for new patent applications. And there it was, filed on the exact day I was fired. The title, Integrated High-Capacity Energy Storage System. The list of inventors had just one name. My name, Dr. Eris Thorne. For a second, I was just confused. Why would they use my name? Then the brutal logic hit me. They had to. Here's the thing about patent law. You have to name the actual inventor. Putting someone else, like Julian or Marcus, would be fraud, an easy way to get the patent thrown out later. So they used me. They wrapped their theft in my identity, turning my own name into a tool for their con. They thought it was clever. They thought by listing me as the inventor, while owning the rights through my employment contract, they had it all sewn up. My employment agreement had an invention assignment clause, standard stuff in tech. It basically said that any invention I came up with during my employment, using company time or resources, belonged to the company. They figured that contract gave them total ownership of Chimera and everything inside it. They had made a critical, arrogant mistake. They assumed everything was created under that company umbrella. They didn't know about my provisional patent. They didn't know I had deliberately created the most vital piece of the invention completely outside of their world. My little placeholder, my secret flag, predated their filing. It covered the very heart of the machine, the single component that made the whole $450 million prototype work. Their patent described a complete system, but I had a legal claim, a priority date on its most vital organ. What they didn't know was that my provisional patent could act as prior art against their application. In the patent world, you can't patent something that already exists. My filing proved that the core concept of the regulation matrix already existed before they filed their patent. This didn't mean I automatically owned Chimera. The fight to prove that would be long and expensive, but it gave me a weapon, a poison pill lodged deep inside their most valuable asset. With it, I could challenge the validity of their entire patent. Their $500 million prototype was built on a foundation of sand, and I was holding the document that could bring in the tide. The shock and anger started to fade, replaced by a cold, clear focus. This wasn't just about being fired anymore. This was about theft on a massive scale. It was about the arrogance of a company that thinks it can own a person's ideas. They thought they had left me with nothing. They were wrong. They left me with a cause and a weapon. That patent filing wasn't just an insult. It was the trigger for a trap they never saw coming. By putting my name on their application, they had accidentally acknowledged me as the inventor, creating a legal link between me and the property they'd stolen. It was the first loose thread in their story, and I was about to pull on it until the whole thing came undone. My first call wasn't to a friend. It was to Elena Ramirez, a name I'd found after a week of obsessive research. She was a patent litigator, a shark known for taking on corporate Goliaths and winning. We met in her sterile downtown conference room, a world away from the creative chaos of my old lab. I laid it all out. The 7 years, the breakthrough, the firing, the patent file minutes later. I explained the invention assignment clause they were banking on. I saw the familiar, weary look of a lawyer who'd heard 100 stories like mine. She was polite but reserved, explaining that the odds were stacked against me. Courts often side with big companies, and Ethelred could bury us in paperwork for years. Then I slid a single document across the polished table. Here's the provisional application I filed for the core regulation matrix. Note the filing date. Elena picked it up. She read it once. Then she read it again, her eyes narrowing. A slow smile spread across her face. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just caught the scent of blood. "Dr. Thorne," she said, her tone shifting from polite to conspiratorial. "They have no idea, do they?" She explained the road ahead wouldn't be quick or clean. The law is a grinder, not a lightning bolt. But the provisional patent was our leverage. It was everything. Our strategy wouldn't be to just ask for a piece of the pie. It would be to argue that their pie was made with stolen ingredients and the whole thing should be thrown out. And that's when the first domino fell. Elena filed our first shot across the bow, a petition to correct inventorship and challenge the validity of Ethelred's entire patent. It was a declaration of war. We argued their patent was worthless because it included my prior, independent invention, and we had the dated provisional filing to prove it. Ethelred's executives, who thought they'd just finished a tidy bit of business, were now staring down a full-blown federal lawsuit. But the courtroom was only one part of the plan. I knew the company's real weakness wasn't a judge, it was the lab. Ethelred had the blueprints, but they didn't have the know-how. They had a copy of the sheet music, but they didn't have the musician. Project Chimera was a complex, temperamental beast, and I was the only one who really knew how to tame it. This led to the second front of my attack, the human front. I didn't engage in sabotage or petty revenge. I did something much worse. I started making quiet calls to the brilliant engineers I had mentored for years. I didn't ask them to quit or leak anything. I just told them my story and then I told them my plan. I'm starting my own company, I said. Thorn Dynamics. We're going to build the next generation of this tech the right way. When I'm ready, there's a place for you. A place where you'll be respected and valued. I planted a seed. The idea that there was a lifeboat, captained by the person they trusted, started to spread. I called it my human virus. It wasn't an attack, it was a promise. Morale at Ethelred, already shaky after I was fired, began to crash. Productivity on Project Chimera ground to a halt. Julian, who'd never bothered to understand the tech, was now trying to manage a team that had lost its leader and its faith. He'd demand progress and get blank stares and excuses. They weren't being difficult, they were simply lost. They were trying to fly a futuristic jet with a car manual. The final piece of my strategy was patience. I knew Marcus and Julian's arrogance was their biggest weakness. They'd see the lawsuit as a nuisance, an attempt to shake them down. They'd throw their expensive lawyers at it, assuming I'd fold. They wouldn't see the real threat until it was too late. So, while Elena buried them in legal motions and my human virus corroded their company from the inside out, I waited. I was planning my resurrection. I refined my business plan for Thorn Dynamics. I networked with venture capitalists. I was building my new castle while laying siege to their old one. They thought they were in a legal skirmish. I knew this was a total war. The first real sign of panic from Ethelred came 6 months into the lawsuit. It arrived in a massive, heavy box at Elena's office. Thousands of pages of internal emails we had fought tooth and nail for in discovery. For the next 48 hours, fueled by coffee and a burning sense of purpose, we dug through the digital guts of the company that betrayed me. And there it was, in black and white, an email from Julian to Marcus, dated 2 weeks before I was fired. Subject, the Thorn Problem. Julian wrote, Marcus, we have everything we need on Chimera. Eris has documented the entire architecture. At this point, she's more of a liability than an asset. I think it's time to transition her out. Marcus's reply was one chilling sentence. Agreed. Execute the transition. And make sure legal has the patent filing ready to go the moment she's out the door. I want it secured before she has time to think. It was the smoking gun. Suddenly, this wasn't just a complicated patent case anymore. It was a simple story of theft. We now had proof of their intent to deceive. When depositions came, I was calm and precise. I walked their lawyers through 7 years of work, my notes, the simulations from my personal computer, and the receipt for my provisional patent. I was the picture of a wronged, credible inventor. Julian's deposition was a disaster. Faced with his own emails, he stammered and contradicted himself, trying to reframe his words until he was tied in knots. His mask of the friendly, competent manager shattered under Elena's surgical questioning. Marcus was even worse. He was arrogant and dismissive, referring to me as the employee and Project Chimera as company property. He truly believed his money and position made him untouchable. The legal record, however, was painting a very different picture. 2 guilty men squirming on the hooks of their own words. While the legal battle raged, the human virus I'd unleashed was reaching its final stage. The first to go was my lead software engineer. He walked into Julian's office, gave 2 weeks' notice, and refused to say where he was going. 2 weeks later, my materials scientist followed. Then the 2 junior engineers I had personally mentored. It was a slow, methodical exodus. They were abandoning a sinking ship. The impact on Project Chimera was immediate and catastrophic. The project stalled completely. They had my blueprints, but they couldn't replicate the intuitive leaps I had made. The regulation matrix, the very heart of the machine, refused to stabilize. They tried to bring in outside contractors who took one look at the mess and quoted exorbitant fees just to try and understand it. Ethelred was burning cash on a skeleton crew that couldn't make progress and consultants who were charging a fortune to fail. News of the stalled project and whispers of our lawsuit started leaking to the financial press. Ethelred's stock, which had soared on the promise of Chimera, began to slide. Investors started calling Marcus, demanding to know what was happening to their golden goose. Why were all the key engineers leaving? And what was this lawsuit from the project's own architect? The narrative Marcus and Julian had controlled was crumbling, replaced by a story of incompetence and legal jeopardy. The company they had stolen from me was becoming the anchor dragging their entire enterprise to the bottom of the sea. The call came on a Wednesday evening. The caller ID just said Marcus Vance. I let it ring 3 times before I answered, taking a slow breath. I wanted to be perfectly calm. Eris, he said. His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a thin, brittle desperation. We need to talk. We're talking, I replied, my voice even. He stumbled through some nonsense about misunderstandings and things getting out of hand. This was a man used to being in control, and you could hear it shredding his nerves. Look, he finally blurted out, this has gone on long enough. The lawsuit, the engineers, it's a mess. Let's be reasonable. What do you want? Name a price. We'll write you a big check. We'll even bring you back as a consultant. Just help us fix this. Help us fix Chimera. And there it was, the desperate, last-ditch attempt to buy his way out of the hole he dug. He still didn't get it. He thought this was about money. He thought he could undo it all with a wire transfer. I let the silence hang for a moment, letting him stew in it. Marcus, I said, my voice as cold and clear as ice, there is no us. You had your chance to have me fix Chimera. That was for the 7 years I worked for you. You decided I was redundant. Remember. Eris, be realistic, he started. No, you be realistic, I cut in. You didn't just fire me. You tried to erase me. You put my name on your stolen goods because you thought it was a clever legal trick. You built your future on my work and assumed I would just disappear. You didn't value me then, and you don't value me now. You value what I can do for you, and that is no longer for sale. Not to you. Not for any price. I could hear him just breathing on the other end of the line. So what happens now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. You're about to find out, I said and hung up. The final court ruling came a month later. It was a total victory. The judge, citing the mountain of evidence from their own emails and the clear priority of my provisional patent, invalidated the key claims of Ethelred's patent for Project Chimera. The patent was rendered commercially worthless. They held a piece of paper for a machine they couldn't build without the rights to its heart, and those rights belonged to me. The court found the company had engaged in fraudulent conduct and awarded me staggering damages. And then, in a move so rare it sent shockwaves through the industry, the judge did something called piercing the corporate veil. He found their fraud was so blatant that Marcus and Julian were held personally liable for a huge portion of those damages. The fallout was swift. With its only major asset gone and its leadership personally bankrupt, Ethelred Innovations collapsed. The stock became worthless. The company was sold for parts. Julian Croft vanished into obscurity, his reputation destroyed. Marcus Vance lost everything. His company, his fortune, his homes. The last I heard, he was facing more lawsuits from his own shareholders. They stole my prototype to get rich, and in the end, it cost them everything they had. If you got some satisfaction out of this story of corporate karma getting its due, do me a favor and hit that like button. It really helps. And if you want more stories about justice being served, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Today, things look very different. I'm sitting in my office, but it's not a cubicle. It's the corner office of a bustling lab with my name on the door. Thorn Dynamics. My old team is here, all of them. We got the funding, and now we're building the true successor to Chimera on our own terms. There's an energy here, a purity of purpose that Ethelred never had. We're not just building a product. We're building a company based on respect for the very innovation it's born from. At 41, I was told I was redundant, a liability to be thrown away. Now I'm a founder and CEO in complete control of my work, my future, and my name. They tried to bury me, but they didn't realize I was a seed. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclamation. And this is just the beginning.